All Saints Church, and I thought that I would do an assembly for you from my home. I have really missed coming in to Hatton Park, having assemblies with you, coming in with the rest of the Open the Book team, and hopefully someday soon we'll be able to come back and share our stories and our assemblies with you. But in the meantime, here are my thoughts for today. I thought we'd just think a little bit about instructions. Now, there's lots of instructions we get each day. At school, I imagine if I asked you, can you think of some instructions that you get at school? You could come up with all sorts of ideas. There might be suggestions about maybe an assembly. Are there instructions when you come into assembly? Yes, you sit nice and quietly, don't you? In the classroom, one instruction would be that you listen to the teacher. As you move around school, you would be encouraged to walk in the corridors. Maybe if it's been very wet outside, you might be encouraged to stay off the grass. And at home, maybe there are some instructions that you have. Maybe when you come inside, you take off your shoes. Or you make sure when you come home from school, perhaps you get changed and you've got to put your clothes neatly away. Or when you go to bed, maybe any dirty clothes have to go in the laundry basket. All sorts of instructions that we have. And there's other instructions. We might be given an instruction to stop when the lights are red. So we get instructions all the time, day after day. Think about who gives you the instructions. At home it might be mummy or daddy, or it could be another grown-up. At school, often it might be the teacher, or it could be a teaching assistant, or maybe another member of staff. Out in the streets, it might be a policeman or a policewoman. There are all sorts of people who can give us instructions. And usually we have to think about who's giving us the instruction before we decide whether or not we follow that instruction. Perhaps you give instructions too. If you're playing a game with some friends and somebody else wants to come and join in, if they're not sure how to play, your job might be to give them instructions so that they can join in and have fun with you too. Now, I thought I'd share a story about some instructions. And this is where I've got three things I'm going to talk about today. And this is the first thing. You can see in here, I've got some flakes dropping on the floor. I have got this. I have got a towel. And in this box, there is some soap. And the last thing is this. It's a banana. So make sure you listen out to see where all these things come in what I say today. The first thing is going to be the story. And this is something that helps me tell my story today. And this is a story from the Bible, a story from a long time ago. And the people of God, the people of Israel, had escaped from Egypt. They'd been led out of slavery, where they'd all had to work very hard, by a man called Moses. And they had left Egypt and they'd come out across the land. They'd been travelling a couple of months and they arrived in a desert. Now, if you know what a desert is like, a desert isn't a place where things grow very easily because it's very dry. There is no water, no rainfall. And the Israelite people were in the desert. And they turned to Moses and they started to grumble. They started to complain. They started to moan. They said, "Why have you taken us out of Egypt? At least in Egypt we had plenty of food to eat. Now you've brought us to the desert. I think we're going to starve. There's no food to eat." Well, Moses went to talk to God. And God said, "I have heard my people. I have heard their complaints. Do not worry. I will look after them. They will be fed. I will provide for them. Every evening they will have meat to eat, and in the morning there will be bread for them. They need to gather what they need for each day, but no more. On the 6th day they gather 2 times the amount that they need, so that on the 7th day they can rest, but they will have enough to eat." Those were the instructions, clear and simple. So Moses was able to go back and tell the people what was going to happen. Not following instructions can have its consequences. We'll think about that too. The Israelite people, that evening, down around the camp, there came lots of birds. They have a bird called a quail. They were able to catch some of those, which provided food for them to eat. In the morning, when they woke up, the dew lay around. The dew is like that moisture that comes covering the ground in the morning when it's been a bit damp. When the dew warmed up off the ground, underneath there were flakes covering the ground. What is it? They asked Moses. Moses said, that is the bread from heaven. And the Israelites called it manna. So they had their flakes, which they were able to take and use to make bread. It tasted nice and sweet, like honey. So the Jewish people had food to eat that was provided for them day after day. Do you remember the instructions? They had to gather enough for one day, no more. But on the 6th day, they could gather enough for 2 days. Well, if the Israelites had some food that was left over to the next day, when they woke up, it had gone bad and there were maggots in it. Maggots like to eat rotten food, so they had to throw it away. And on the 7th day, some of the Israelites went out to look for food. But do you remember they'd been told that there would only be food on 6 days? Well, they went out and there was no food to be found. So they had to follow the instructions they'd been given. And do you know, those people lived in the desert for 40 years wandering around. And God fed them for 40 years when they followed the instructions. So we have consequences when we don't follow the instructions. If you all talk in assembly, it gets too noisy and nobody can hear anything. There are instructions at the minute where we are living with this virus, and one of the really important instructions, do you remember what I showed you earlier? One of the important instructions is remembering to wash our hands, and so that's what the soap and the towel are for. And I'm sure in school and at home you are being reminded that it's really important, that instruction to wash your hands. It just helps to stop these things spreading and helps to keep people safe. That's a really important message. Do you remember? I had one more thing that I haven't told you about. To do with following instructions. My banana. Well, one type of instructions I like to follow is following a recipe. I like baking. And when you follow a recipe, there are lots of instructions about what you need and what you need to do to it in order to make something. And many years ago, one of the things I like to make is banana bread. And I decided to make some banana bread with some bananas. And I got my ingredients together and I followed the recipe. I thought something wasn't quite right. Well, it wasn't until halfway through baking my banana bread that I noticed something sitting beside the oven. The bananas. I made banana bread and forgot to put the bananas in. My cake still tasted nice, but it didn't taste like bananas. That was the consequence of me not following the instructions. So that's my message to you, is that it's important for us to remember to follow the instructions, especially when those people are giving us instructions that are there to keep us safe, to keep us healthy, and to keep us doing things right. Okay, I'm so sorry I can't actually see you all, but I hope that it has been something that you've learnt from today, and hopefully we'll get to see you sometime soon. Okay, bye.